in good time to hear the opposition front bench as well as the Minister, and not to be late. Minister Michael Tomlins.
Madam Deputy Speaker, thank you very much indeed. May I first of all join the honourable gentleman, the member for Aberavon, my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, and the Shadow Home Secretary, in sending my sincere condolences to the friends and families of the person who died on the Bibby Stockholm. May I also thank the honourable gentleman for his warm welcome to me. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's right to say that I have received from many colleagues on both sides of the House warm messages of congratulations on taking on this role, and I'm sure that at least some of them were genuine and that they meant it. May I also pay tribute to my right honourable friend, the member for Newark. May I pay tribute to for his work in this role, to him personally, and may I say, perhaps within the privacy of this chamber, how sorry I was to see him resign, and how I welcomed and respected the work that he has done in this role, and how I look forward to working constructively with him in the future. It is right to say, and I agree with him, that there is a disagreement between us, but it is a good faith disagreement. He was right when he said that, and I agree with him. I agree with his point about the need for legal certainty, and I commit to working with him on that very point. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, may I take the central thrust of this bill and tackle head-on the point that the honourable gentleman has made, because the point of this bill is to address the concerns that the Supreme Court set out on the 15th of November of last month. It is right to say that I respect the judgment of the Supreme Court. As a former law officer, Madam Deputy Speaker, perhaps you'd expect me to say nothing less. And it is because we respect that judgment that we have looked at it so carefully, that we have responded not just with this bill, which seems to have escaped many honourable and right honourable members opposite, but with a treaty, with an internationally binding treaty that my right honourable friend secured in Kigali last week. This bill was subsequently tabled, and we are debating it here at second reading. And that built, of course, on the Memorandum of Understanding that my right honourable friend, the member for Witham, secured all those years ago. And I will, if I may, come back to her speech, and I was very grateful for her contribution. But perhaps, Madam Deputy Speaker, I can pick up some of the threads of the debate in this way. What we have heard from some of the contributions is what I would phrase as the moral case for stopping the boats, the compassionate case for stopping the boats, the reason why it is a moral imperative that we stop these modern-day slavers, that we smash these criminal gangs who are trying to push vulnerable people across the busiest shipping lane in the world, where people have lost their lives. Those of us on this side of the House are determined to take action. We are determined to smash those gangs, the modern-day slavery of our time. And some have raised the monetary cost. Some have said, well, how much is this costing us? Well, I ask, what about the human cost? What about the human misery? What about the human misery that the slavers are actually driving people to? There is nothing compassionate. There is nothing compassionate about having an open borders policy, and that is what we have heard too much of today and in the past weeks and months. Can I address the point about the strength of the bill and the concern that many on this side of the House have raised, legitimately raised, about concerns about spurious claims that may be made, that some claims may be made about... Of course I'll give way to the honourable lady, honourable gentleman, specifically on the point of spurious claims. He has an honourable lady behind him who may be seeking to intervene in a few moments. To the honourable gentleman.
Ever so much, Minister, and I'm grateful for you giving me. Can he tell the House, in his view, how many people will be deported to Rwanda next year?
It will start off in the hundreds and it will scale up to the thousands. Can I say I enjoyed his speech? Whenever he speaks I always think he's a smile behind the grimace and behind the stare. I always enjoy speaking, and I always hear him being heckled, enjoy hearing him being heckled from this side of the House as well. Those on this side are anxious about spurious claims being made, about people asserting that they are unwell, that they are not fit to fly, when the contrary is the case. Can we say that those who are crossing in small boats, who actually are making the crossings, not those who are unwell, but those who are fit young men. 84% of those who are making the crossings are male. 77% of those are aged between 18 and 39. So I agree with my honourable and right honourable friends when they say they want to make this work, when they say they want to make it legally tight. That is absolutely right, and I want to join them in that endeavour. How could I refuse, my honourable?
So much. I'm most grateful.
I
wish to be a little formal about this, but will my right honourable friend seek a ruling from Mr Speaker that the long title and the scope of the bill will or may be amended to ensure that amendments may be moved and selected, at least by the government, and even by backbenchers, as on previous occasions?
May I say directly to my honourable friend that I will continue to work with him on this. I will come back to his specific points, and I will come back and address, I hope, his very concern, perhaps specifically in response to his neighbour's points during the course of his speech as well. May I pick up my right honourable friend, the member for Witham, who actually spoke powerfully and directly about her contribution to this, as well as my honourable friend, the member for North Norfolk, my honourable friend, the member for Torbay, and others as well. Because she said rightly, she talked about the UNHCR and the EU. Let's debate this. Let's have this point. Because the very day after the UNHCR were advocating in the Supreme Court that Rwanda was not safe, how galling was it to see that the UNHCR itself sent 168 refugees to Rwanda, 168, the very next day, as a part of the hundreds of thousands, a scheme that is already up and running, and supported and backed by the EU to the tune of millions of euros. Exactly. And we need to hear more of that, and I'm very grateful to my honourable friend. Let me come to contributions in the short time that I've got left from honourable and right honourable members. The honourable member for Strangford and the right honourable member for East Antrim raised a specific point that I want to address head on. This bill will apply in full in Northern Ireland in the same way that it does in the rest of the United Kingdom. It is explicit, it is on the face of the bill, and will always be the case, reflecting that immigration policy is a UK-wide matter. I want to be particularly clear that nothing in the Windsor Framework or the TCA agreement affects that. Where people have raised concern is around the rights chapter of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. In addition, I want to be clear that the rights chapter of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement does not affect any clause within this bill in any way. I think I have time to address the specific concern that the honourable member for Strangford raised earlier on in the debate. It is important to be clear the 2005 Procedures Directive is not within the annexes of the Windsor Framework. Yes, of course I do.
Gary Robinson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, to the Minister for addressing those points as clearly as he did. He will acknowledge that while he has addressed them in his closing remarks this evening, the Home Office published legal advice yesterday that didn't touch on any of these points. Could I ask the Minister to take steps in the days that come to go further and update that legal guidance, that legal advice, in a way that encompasses the points that he's just raised to assuage the concerns of the House this evening?
Minister.
May I give the honourable gentleman this commitment, that I will continue to work with him on the points that he has raised. And I need to be careful about legal advice as a former law officer. What has been published is a government legal position statement that is different from legal advice, and he will understand the differences in relation to that position. But he has heard what I said, and I was grateful to him for welcoming the points that I made in response to the specific concerns that were raised. May I come back to my honourable friend, the member for Stone, because he mentioned the House of Lords Select Committee, the Constitution Committee. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, that gave me flashbacks to my grilling by that illustrious committee when I was sitting alongside my right honourable friend, the Attorney General, in my formal role as Solicitor General. And we followed that very report that my honourable friend, the member for Stone, mentioned. May I turn to the Chair of the Select Committee, the Honourable Member for Kingston upon Hull North, the Chair of the Select Committee for the Public Accounts Committee, the Honourable Member for Hackney South and Shoreditch. And the simple point I would say to her is I can't address each and every one of her points here, but I know that she's looking forward to asking me some specific questions tomorrow afternoon when I attend her committee with my honourable friend, the member for Corby. We then had, Madam Deputy Speaker, what I'm going to describe as a former law officer fest. We had the pleasure of hearing from my right honourable and learned friend, the member for Torwich and West Devon. We had the pleasure of listening to my honourable and learned friend, the chairman of the Select Committee. We had the pleasure of listening and hearing from my predecessor, my illustrious predecessor, my right honourable and learned friend, the member for Swindon South. And I'm pleased to say that I am now a former law officer as well. And we therefore have a joint endeavour and a joint interest in making sure that this legislation works. I've mentioned my right honourable friend, the member for Witham, and I've mentioned her important point about Rwanda and the rather patronising tone that is sometimes raised by members opposite when it comes to our international partners who have signed up to an internationally binding legal treaty with this country. Oh, of course I'll give way.
Welcome the Immigration Minister to his post. Is he aware that while he's been speaking, the New Conservatives, the European Research Group, the Northern Research Group, the Conservative Growth Group and the Common Sense Group have all said that they cannot support the bill and are going to abstain tonight? Does he accept that this looks like the Prime Minister's breakfast meeting was a total failure? And does he accept this is just complete civil war in the Conservative Party?
Madam Deputy Speaker, the answer is no, no and no. I am here. I have been in the chamber. May I turn to my right honourable friend and neighbour, the member for Bournemouth West, and may I thank my constituency neighbour for his delivery, for a powerful and compassionate speech, as he always gives. May I turn to my right honourable friend, the member for Clwyd West. He asked me to work with him, he asked me to be open-minded, he asked me to look at ways to make the bill more effective. In contrast to the previous intervention, my answer is yes, yes and yes. He and I have worked together before, and I commit to continuing to work again with him in the rest of the passage of the course of this bill. In the time that I've got, forgive me, I won't. In the time that I've got left, I'm going to refer to my honourable friend, the member for Devizes. I hope he will continue to work with me on this bill. I listened very carefully to what he had to say. I listened with great interest to my honourable friend, the member for Barrow and Furness, who is a member of the Select Committee and spoke with great authority. My honourable friend, the member for Dover, who spoke very clearly about her position and how the impact on her constituency, the direct impact on her constituency, and the imperative of making sure that we stop the boats. My honourable friend, the member for Gainsborough, the speech in my notes, it's described as that he was on fire. That's what my notes say. He was on fire. And those who missed his speech should go and watch it again on playback. My honourable friend was on fire, and I was grateful for his contribution. My honourable friend, the member for Runnymede and Weybridge, who made a powerful, measured and careful speech. And I was grateful for his earlier intervention during the course of the debates as well. My honourable friend, the member for Ruislip, Norwood and Pinner, I thank him for his contribution. I thank him in particular and sincerely for mentioning our late colleague James Brokenshire and for mentioning the work that he did so ably in this area. My honourable friend, the member for Boston and Skegness. Common sense from Boston is what my notes say here, and I thank him for his contribution. My honourable friend from Don Valley, there were attempts to shout him down whilst he was speaking. He stood up, as he often does, and he stood up in this chamber in the face of that barrage, He talks openly about his faith, and I respect him sincerely for the way that he does that and for the way that he conducts his business in this chamber. My honourable friend, the member for Bury North, who has the distinction of serving on not one but two select committees. Not only does he do that, Madam Deputy Speaker, but he does it with distinction and with diligence. I always like listening to his speeches. He had the temerity to suggest that lawyers may from time to time disagree with each other. What an outrageous suggestion he made. I'm only sorry that there weren't more lawyers in the chamber to hear that particular point. My honourable friend, the member for Broughton, made an outstanding speech. The inescapable, the inestimable, the irresistible logic of my honourable friend's speech. More people should have been here to hear what he said. It was absolutely logical, it was compelling. My honourable friend, the member for Torbay, I have turned to him before and I thank him as well for being, as one of my predecessors, for his work in this area, for pointing out what has already happened since the Supreme Court, namely the treaty. My honourable friend, the member for North Norfolk, gave us actual numbers, not just a percentage, but actually turning it into numbers. And my honourable friend, the member for Gloucester, took us on a tour du monde. It is not just our country that is facing these challenges. This is a challenge of our time. This is a global challenge. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me end with this. I have sat through this debate. Out of the 6.5-hour debate, I have sat here for more than 6 hours of it. I have heard every single speech from this side of the House and most speeches from the other side. I have heard every single front bench speech from the Labour Party, and what was missing was a plan. Labour have no plan. Intervention after intervention. Where is the plan? There was chuntering from the Home Secretary from a sedentary position, Madam Deputy Speaker. Where is the plan? Answer came there none. There was a verbal vacuum. There wasn't even a cut and paste solution. There was no plan whatsoever. Contrast that with the clear determination of all of those on this side of the chamber to stop the boats. And Madam Deputy Speaker, I commend this bill to the House.
Order. Order.